What makes a good anime character? For me personally, I think it's intention and what your, what the purpose of that character is. Now, of course, as an illustrator, there's a lot of things you want to consider when designing your character. But I think on the onset, you have to think about that character's purpose, right? And where they sit within your story and how it pushes your story along. A lot of that stuff helps me cultivate the character design. Very iconic character designs, like, for example, Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter, him being this kind of devious clown, is also embedded in the fact of his playful nature and the fact that he is there for mostly the fun of combat and the challenge of it. And when you think about a circus clown as we know him from the manga, that the challenge of doing all of these different feats is embedded into his design. And that to me is what makes a strong anime character in general, whether it's a villain or a hero. So when I'm considering my character designs, a lot of the time my characters come from this autonomous drawing, but I start to give myself prompts before the character is even developed. So, I may think of a particular personality or purpose, and maybe this character is a farmer. And then I start thinking of opposites. Well, maybe what do they farm? Well, maybe they're a futuristic farmer. And in the future, what are they farming for, right? Maybe they're farming for old technology. And so what does that farmer look like in 3045, right? Farming for what? Like built-in technology. And then that starts to inform the type of character design. What do these overalls look like from a futuristic perspective? Is it a robot wearing overalls, or is it some form of an alien wearing overalls? And what does that look like for its limb structure? And so when people see my characters and they go, man, just looking at your character designs, I feel like they tell a story. And it's simply because they come from a story first. And that to me, I think makes a strong character in general.
Do you have a farmer though?
No, I just,
cool. Who's your next character?
Yeah, I made that up. I mean,
that's cool. Though.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how I come up with a lot of my characters. And it's rarely ever divine intervention. It's rarely ever like, oh, I'm inspired, it comes up, right? I treat my art like my own job, where I make time for it, regardless of whether I feel inspired or not. I manufacture that inspiration. So recently I was inspired. Something just popped into my head. And I was like, man, I feel like magic always lacks for me in some shows. And like for something like, Harry Potter. And I'm like, I want to see a John Wick version of Harry Potter. That's what I want to see. I want to see like magical talent, like at its top tier. And then that made me start thinking about a particular character who's like left the magical world for like his or her own reasons. And then I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if I created a character that had a wand, but it was a cross between a wand and a stave. And so now I'm on this role where I'm like, okay, you get this character who like, maybe he lost his brother through magic and has sworn it off, but was super talented and like has their own modified thing. So my prompts of drawing every day and trying to manufacture inspiration and creativity helps me when I do get that active god of inspiration. Why call it Black Anime? Well, a big reason why my book is called Black Anime is it's an homage to my audience. So when I started drawing Black characters exclusively from 2016 on, as I started amassing an audience, everybody just kept saying, oh, this is Black anime. This is Black anime. We need a Black anime. And I think the reason why that showed through is, of course, there's not a lot of Black mainstream kind of anime characters or even Black mainstream heroes in general. Growing up, obviously Static Shock was one. We had John Stewart, the Green Lantern in the Justice League, which I loved him. But outside of that, we were always relegated to secondary characters. And in anime, it would either didn't exist or it was very racist. So in making the content that I was making, telling the stories that I was telling, people started to gravitate toward it and was like, this is for us, right? Because now we're able to see ourselves in it. And I think the audience calling it black anime, there's so much to black culture in general, right? And I mean, deculturalized black culture around the world, where we assimilate a lot of the cultures around it, and we kind of change it to fit our style and change it to some reference back to the home continent, right? And it's just kind of our spin on it. And when people look at my work and when I do research for my work, it kind of shows through. A lot of people get hung up on the name black anime, and I think it's really should be more about the content behind it, and I think the name is something that kind of should let people know how much less we are in that medium. And then when we are shown, to really show light on like, well, there's black characters, and then you look at them and you're like, well, the first black character in Naruto was a rapper, and he wasn't even that good of a rapper. You look at one of the animes that really got me into anime, or one of them, you look at the black characters in Dragon Ball. And, those are they're clearly racist, right? So, when we look at these favorite mediums that sometimes represent us, they tend to lack. And that was kind of where I think my artwork kind of filled that gap. How would I define my art style? I think it's an amalgam of a lot of different artists that I really appreciate. To say that here, personally, I don't actually like my art style. I'm still trying to find it. A lot of artists will say that, but I'm constantly kind of working through my own visual shape language to find a style I really like, the faces and kind of the anatomy. What I will say, the features that you'll find when you're looking at my art is rooted in a lot of fashion. I come from a little bit of a fashion background. So when a lot of people see my work, they're like, wow, the clothes, the fit just looks insane. And it's because I do a lot of fashion research. And then through my research, that kind of filters through. So I'm also a big fan of mythology and history. And I've studied a bunch of different mythologies from all over the world. As of late, I would say as of late, but in the last decade, I've jumped into the African diaspora. But you'll also find that interlaced through all of my artwork, whether that is iconography or different motifs, or even the way I treat certain color palettes. If you ever research it or look it up, you'll see the connective tissue almost right away. So some of those features are embedded into the style, right, of the particular characters, whether it's like the high fashion combined with certain levels of mythology. Now, when it comes to the phenotypes of my characters, I clearly draw black characters or African characters from all throughout the diaspora. But one of the things I like to do is switch up my certain characteristics, right, within the face, the phenotypes. So the sizes of the noses, the sizes of the lips, the almond-shaped eyes. You'll find a lot of me trying to translate black phenotypes into the anime style of the bigger eyes, the smaller noses, the particular face shapes. And I don't want to lose that in my artwork. And that's what I find is really hard about discovering my style, is because I'm constantly trying to keep it in the lane of anime while simultaneously breaking a little bit of the rules of anime. Kind of my journey of being able to get a lot of the work done in the time between time, as I talked about, is I had to find other places where I could work. And one of my major sources of time was the train. And so I did a majority of my drawing on the train. Initially, it started off with my sketchbook. Right. I would draw sketches in my sketchbook to prepare what I was going to try to draw and finish when I got home. And then Wacom released a device that allowed me to work mobily, which completely changed the game for me. I started drawing on the train every day because I had roughly an hour and change commute. And as I'm drawing every day, as I'm developing kind of my audience and my skills are growing, Instagram releases Instagram Live. And I'm like, man, I really wish I had an opportunity to kind of take advantage of this, because now that my audience is growing, this is a great way for me to kind of connect with them. Maybe I can kind of show them what I'm doing. And that kind of started me not just drawing on the train, but also drawing and showing my process on the train as well. So I would take my phone go on Instagram, say what's up to everybody. And I used to wear this pendant a few years back. I lost it somewhere now. And I would take my phone, place it on my chest, hang the pendant around it so the phone would face down. And I'd have my Cintiq here on my lap, both hands free. So now I'm drawing and I'm using my express keys, and people were walking by, seeing me on the train as my phone's facing down, and I'm kind of drawing. And that was kind of another way where I was able to connect to my audience in a special way, right? And have them they were seeing me produce artwork, and they're like, how the hell is this guy producing as much artwork as he is while also working full time? And they were seeing that process. Like, they could literally hear the train moving in the background, and they could see me kind of working and then being like, all right, guys, I got to get up. I'm at Penn Station. And then kind of going along. And I thought that was kind of a really special moment that I was able to kind of build into my process of kind of creating. But in the beginning, that was 2 hours a day. So a good 2 hours a day out of, let's say, my 4 to 6 hours of drawing. So a third of that time was in transit. And I can only imagine losing that time. Some of my greatest art discoveries have been on the train. I think when I realized what was making my artwork really flat, like why I couldn't get my characters to feel voluminous, I remember developing that and developing that understanding while I was on the go. So, art being about discovery as you're growing is like, I would have had to wait to get home. And would I have made that discovery, right, if I was not in that place in that time, to be able to draw and say, oh, I need to start adding diagonal lines. And diagonal lines denote space. I started seeing it everywhere in this particular drawing, right? Maybe if I got home, I would have been too tired or too stressed or too whatever. But in that moment, while the train's whizzing through Jamaica, I had this discovery. So, yeah. As a creator who's cut out his own space on the internet, right? As I've developed my own following, I get a lot of people that ask me, like, how do I build my numbers up, right? How do I carve out the same space that you've kind of carved out on the internet? And there's a multitude of ways to do it. We're going to go back into intention again. You have to figure out what your intention is for building your numbers and having yourself stand out and what you want to do. I was posed with a very hard question at the start of a lot of this, because I started seeing people's numbers blow up really quickly as artists who were doing a lot of fan art. And as a person who wanted to draw a lot of black people, how many black characters were there out there for me to do artwork of? And that became my charge. And I started kicking myself like, man, my numbers could just be blowing up right now if I started drawing a bunch of Pokemon, if I started drawing a bunch of characters from My Hero Academia and all these other mainstream anime. But then I started to realize too, like, that's what those people are following them for. So if they ever wanted to make their own thing or break out and do their own stuff, it would be extremely hard to do that because they've developed an audience who's only come to them for things that have already been established. So for me, I'm like, how do I stand out? I know I want to make anime and I know I have to be a good artist, but I also want to tell my own stories. I also want people to want to indulge in those stories as well. So for me, I took what I thought was the harder route in saying I'm only making original characters. I'm only going to do original black characters. I'm only going to try to create original stories based off of black and African mythologies from all over the world. And that was what I would call my value proposition to the art world, to the anime world. So opposed to trying to recreate what was already done, my lane was, how do I make something unique in this genre? Like green tea ice cream, if you will, right? Like taking something from your culture, adding it with another culture, and then allowing it to flourish. If I was an artist right now coming up and I'm brand new and I'm looking at all the new changes with social, and I'm asking myself, how do I want people to perceive me? What is my purpose for building these numbers? Do I want to be an independent creator? Do I want to work for a studio? Do I just want adoration for what I'm doing because people have told me art is not something to be adored, right? And you take that and you utilize that as your purpose for being able to stand out. Now, one of the best ways to get picked up by a studio is doing fan art, really, because they want to see your interpretation of a thing, right? And, you know, you lace in some of your original stuff here or there, but once you build up a big enough audience, it shows that you can draw, right? It shows that you can manipulate something that's already been established to fit in your style, which means you have a unique style. Studio may pay for that. Now, if you're like, I want to make stories, I want to make an anime, I want to make a comic book, then you have to lead with that as your example. You have to keep making original things and seeing what catches, and then developing an audience. You might not develop tens of thousands of people who start following you out of the blue, but you have to realize that they're following that person because of what has already been established. The other people have already did that groundwork. You as an original creator may bring in 10 people a day or 3 people a day, but those 3 people want original work. They want your stories. So when you drop something original, your sell-through rate may be 30-40% because that's why people are there. Whereas if you build an audience off of fan art and you try to do something original, you might only have a sell-through rate of 10%, 4% of what your original stuff is, because that's not why people are there. So if you want to stand out, choose your reason for standing out, pick that lane and go at it, you know?
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when we upload a new video, be sure to hit that bell icon above. If you'd like to see more of Mike Toney's work, see the links in the description below. And last but not least, special thanks to Lawrence Sinsheimer. Until then, see you in the next video.